our time. It's so amazing, it reminds me of the quote from Thich Nhat Hanh that said, the Sangha is the new Buddha. And we know that in our gatherings, we feel that the alive energy of that truth and the way in which we're no longer alone because we are one, and we know that in this experience. So just close your eyes and move into the spaciousness that you find within. That is the source, the awake awareness out of which everything arises. Knowing ourselves as this I am this awake awareness, this scintillating, effulgent, awake awareness. And if you position yourself as witness just behind your body, just behind your body mind, that from there you'll see that this body mind arises in this awake awareness that is the truth of who I am. And know that for yourself. This body mind is the vehicle through which we move into a 3D reality and experience and express there. And so, but who we are is this sentence, is this awareness, is this fountain of consciousness, always arising, overflowing, and available for creating its source. And I am that. So we join each other with this place that the oneness is all that is. And we are knowingly there now. And so it is.
Sure. Okay, so we're just going to go around the circle and you can
Roll call.
say your name so Polly knows who's here.
Yarrow.
Sue.
Dharma Daisy.
Here, Paolo.
Amara.
Manuela.
Lily. Marcy.
Robert.
Linda.
JL.
Amora.
Carolyn.
Daniel.
Thank you.
And on the camera, from Siri joined and Sergio joined and Monica joined and Janine joined. And I think I said unmute already.
The power of the Sangha. When two or more gathered, we feel the ebullience, we experience the scintillating possibility of this field that we are an aspect of and know ourselves as. And the generative nature of that creative sentience is alive. That's where aliveness is, and only the mind ever occludes it from our experience. I talk too much. And then I have to have a talk drop. Yeah. One of the things we've been talking about in some of the smaller groups, and I've been working with people individually, is the way in which the external reality, which is a projection, and typically it's a projection through the distortion field of our own woundedness, our own limited sense of who we are. So then what happens is that in that distortion field, our attention particles are magnetized because our attention is the vehicle that consciousness uses to engage, to experience, to create. So when we are, I use the early description of our incarnating being, that precious little infant, probably got karmic debts, but we won't talk about those. But that precious little infant that's all deliciousness and lying there with its little angel wings, trailing clouds of glory, not really. And then something happens, and the attention goes like that, and all of a sudden, what had
Battery 70%.
70%. That might be, I may have some kind of monitor on I may only be 70% here. So what happens then is that where it had been insular and present as its own experience of its true nature, hopefully to some degree, we will not go there again, then it all of a sudden its attention particles, the awareness, is magnetized into the external, where something is happening, and the experience of the incarnating one is, oh dear, this is not good, right? It's like the atmosphere, the frequency, and this happens varyingly, of course. All of us have our different experiences of when we first experienced the idea that we were not okay, and that there was something that was a little bit off, maybe a lot off, according to the level of the experience. So now our attention particles are in what we could call the external reality. And they are hyper alert because all of a sudden things didn't seem like they were okay for that incarnating being. There was a agitation in its energetic field, and perhaps a specific experience of being neglected, or of being put aside, or of being not taken care of, not fed, not held, many little things. And the least little thing can happen, and then the way in which it's experienced, when that gets installed, it's like now that is this what I call the distortion field, or it's the beginning of it, the distortion field that we perceive reality through. Anais Nin, the Cuban poetess, most people don't know she was Cuban. I didn't know that, but I know who she was. She said, "We do not see the world as it is, we see the world as we are." And one of my favorite teachers said, reality is in the eye, the identity of the beholder. Whoever you think you are, that's the distortion field. That's the lens through which you then experience whatever shows up. So now we're kind of like caught in this dynamic of that there's an out there, and it is experienced as creating our experience. So we now believe that it's the external, and that certainly is the experience of the incarnating being. And initially identifying as a body mind and not getting what it needs, or feeling that there's some perturbation in the field that doesn't feel okay, doesn't feel like love, ease, connection. Then the external becomes the information. Now the attention particles, and again, the attention particles are the tools that consciousness uses to interact with awareness. When the lens is created, that is the information of the earliest experience of not being safe, loved, accepted, connected to. When that lens is created, now the world shows up, and because that was the information that created the lens, the appearance of whatever is happening will be experienced as that condition: not safe, not okay, not loved, not taken care of. So whatever is going on out there in what we might call reality, but there may not be another reality except this one, this projection, right? So that was a little leap there. But no matter what's going on out there, we experience it as our idea of who we are, or our idea of who we're not. I'm not good enough, I don't matter. And then the game is on. After that, what I think of as an installation occurs, then the field of one's, in quotes, one's own reality is informed by that conclusion. I'm not good enough. I don't matter. Whatever it was, whatever the wound can be, the wound can be spoken like that. So that no matter what shows up, our experience will be what we already believe about ourselves and about the world. So it's saying that it's a distortion field is the best way I've come upon to describe it. But to realize that we're living in it, and the information that we're getting from it has everything to do with our conclusion about who I am, and very little to do with the reality of what's actually going on. There's another leap here, because there's nothing actually going on except in one's own consciousness. To say that there's no out there is a kind of radical pointing to the way in which realities arise. The realities arise in the awake awareness that we are. They are created out of sentience, out of consciousness. So we are powerful creators depending on what we believe about ourselves and what we believe about the, in quotes, world out there. The attention particles are scintillating in a way. I think of them as little, some kind of little video game, maybe the little Pac-Man, I don't know. But they are vibrating, and then they are magnetized into the act out there by what the distortion field is. And so we are unlikely to have our attention on something. In fact, we will not have our attention on something that's not represented by our already in place conclusion about ourselves and reality. So if I have concluded I don't matter, I didn't get my feeding on time and my diaper changed or whatever, but out of that experience, and as I matured and got language, I concluded I don't matter, then my attention particles can only pick up and inform me of anything that matches that, right? Because if it's other than that, I simply will not see it. There won't be enough resonance for it to even report. Now, because the mind is caught in polarity, often we can have the other end of the stick, the polarity. But even in that, say that you've always wanted to have this great relationship, and finally he, she shows up, and it's really going well. But underneath that experience, because you believe you'll never get what you want, that was the early wounding conclusion, there is that fundamental undercurrent of doubt, that fundamental undercurrent of when will the next shoe fall, right? So there's never any, at the level of polarity, you're never going to be fulfilled. And the mind is based in polarity. The early wounding is based in polarity. So our job is to come home. It's like you are reclaiming your attention particles from out there and bringing them back to yourself. They come into alignment as what I call true north. The part of the practice, the part of the teaching that I do is what does it mean to come home to being your authentic self? What does it mean to be on your own behalf? What I call true north, present and speaking authentically, instead of being caught up in adaptive behaviors, the purpose of which is to try not to experience what you concluded about yourself when you were 3 months old or in utero or 1 year old. This making sense to everybody? It's kind of a refresher for all of you. I know that all of you in here have done so much work in consciousness. You've had a lot of attention particles on consciousness. I think the only issue for any of you, it certainly was for this body-mind unit, was the idea that there was a person there that was going to wake up. So the minute that fell away, it was like, all right, this is cool. It's like the Southwest airline commercial where it says, you're now free to move around the country, right? It's like, you're now free to move through realities with like wonder and awe and the fulfillment of the arising that you're no longer in resistance to and no longer in neediness regarding. And so you're connected. You see, the only thing that separates you from anything or anyone else is your own self-judgment. This is the coolest thing I teach. I love this so much. Once you're no longer judging yourself and that's fallen away, there's nothing between you and everything. All that is. It's the self-judgment. That's the lens. That's the initial distortion lens through which consciousness projects and creates a reality, looking like it's against us. So when your self-judgment falls away and there's no lens of judgment there, then there's no judgment anymore. And so you begin to actually experience what's touted in all of our New Age early beginnings as oneness. Yeah. Touted, yes. So it drops away and now there's no separation because all that separates us ever is our self-judgment. All that separates us ever is our self-judgment. And so when that falls away and you come home to your oneness, to your knowingness, to that awake awareness in which everything arises, and you know that as the one I am, then that's heaven on earth. A new heaven and a new earth. I believe that's what we came here to do in this incarnational cycle, where all of us have shown up varyingly to reconnect in whatever way we try. It's certainly a grand adventure. Yeah. So anybody have topics that we want to address together or questions about your own process? Because it always serves everybody.
I'm just gonna ask you if you will speak to what you talked about yesterday a little bit more in terms of that our particles are, because I always thought of my particles are going out into the field, but you clarified they're going out into my projection.
Right. Yeah, and because the field is your projection. You're not free of the distortion field until there's no self-judgment, right? Right. So, but your attention particles are going to be magnetized to the out there that matches what you already believe about yourself. I'm not sure that's where we were going yesterday.
No,
I have no memory of what I say from, I don't remember what I said.
it's okay.
5 seconds ago.
We'll see if it shows up.
Yeah, see if it shows up. But the attention particles are critical because that's what we use to create our experience, right? That's what I think of as the mechanism of consciousness, your attention. And wherever your attention goes, there you're going to be locked in. That's what you're going to experience. Now, when we have the distortion field that's created early on with the early wounding, then our attention particles are used always on behalf of that. Yeah. We're going to notice what will trigger us. It's going to trigger us. Yeah. The good news about being triggered is that that's the royal road to waking up, but that's a different conversation.
Robert has a hand up.
Are you right there? There you
Yes.
are. I see you now.
It seems to me, and I've heard you say several times that don't do this.
I can't remember what I
no,
say either. So you're off the
Talking
hook.
about being on our own behalf,
Right.
and it occurs to me as I look at me, and I think about looking through all of the various distortion fields I'm starting to realize I have, that it's impossible to accurately, for me, to accurately say that's what's best for me. Okay.
Yeah.
And if it's impossible to say, well, that's what's best for me, then it's pretty much impossible to show up on my own behalf.
Mhm.
Because even if all the intentions are perfect, the target isn't.
Mhm.
So it seems to me practically impossible to show up on your own behalf
Mhm.
until you get a substantial amount of the distortion fields gone.
Right. Yeah, so what happened with the very earliest experience that we call the early wounding, and what happens is that it's like we're like this, right? We're back here with ourselves, maybe in utero, maybe early months of incarnation, but we're back here with ourselves, and then something happens in the external, and we are magnetized there into the external, usually with a frequency of fear or some version of fear, probably, right? So that's why when we're talking about waking up, there are two directions that I use in the teaching that I do. One is if you're triggered, you do the 6 steps, and we use the trigger to find out what you're believing, right? The other one is to begin to come home to yourself, because that was the abandonment that you suffered most deeply with, is that you as awareness are not there for this incarnating being. And now the conclusion is that you don't deserve that. You're a piece of shit. You don't matter. It's all of that. So when we talk about being on your own behalf, it is like you're pointing to, it is a slippery slope, because you feel like you're going into narcissism or something, right? Or that nobody else matters. But there's a clarity to come from, I call it trying the spirit of it. It's like, if I am, say I'm invited to a dinner party and I had planned to read a book on meditation or even to meditate, but then Linda thinks you should go to the dinner party, right? So it's like a conundrum, and you're like, you're caught there. But just to get in touch, it's like trying the spirit. It's like feeling what it feels like. What would I be doing? How would it be for me if I'm at home and with my meditation or my book or what it would be like? So it's like considering, what do I really want? What do I want to experience? And risk that you are coming home to yourself as you take the risk that you might piss somebody off or offend somebody or whatever. Because, you know, the radical perception is the one expressed by Ramana Maharshi when the devotee who had been listening to Ramana talk about basically being on your own behalf. The devotee came up after the Dharma talk and said to Ramana, "But Guru, what about the others?" And Ramana looked at him puzzled and said, "There are no others." So when you start to line up to be present on your own behalf, that's how your service to the whole. This is a radical teaching, and it certainly goes contrary to all of the ways in which we have been both internally motivated and externally required to be good people or a good person. So, but our contribution, what we're here to do is to shift the frequency of this reality. And we are participating in being in a duality that carries the frequency of fear by self-abandonment. There isn't anybody else who can be on your own side. It's your own side. Yeah. Does that help at all?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah, Lily and then Marcy.
I was hoping you could say something about the consensus reality that we're in now with fire, disaster, heartbreak.
Right.
And certainly the polarities are way out of whack. Can you tell us a way to quickly help us back up into our soul awareness?
Right. Well, my sense of it, and this is just my sense of it, is that just as in an individual's experience, we have an extreme in the fear or the polarity that we call hitting rock bottom, or things turn to shit, or everything goes awry in our personal life. It may have to do with addiction, it may have to do with money, relationship, all the usual suspects. I believe that what's happening collectively now is a version of that we've been caught in a reality that's fundamentally polarized, a good end of the stick and a bad end of the stick, right? And we certainly see that in the politics and in all of what we think of as the out there, the collective reality. And so I believe that it's extreme. I think that our way of being present with it, the most important thing we can do is our own clarity and then to be in response to whatever shows up in your world that is a part of, it may show up that a friend says, "I'm going to volunteer to hand out the dinners, would you come with me?" It may be that. It may be that you sit in the sense of meditation and a higher understanding of the nature of reality as the awareness in which everything is arising, and that is moving now through what looks like tragedy and catastrophe and all of the suffering. But just as with an individual, this collective grouping is shifting, I believe. I do believe that it's our frequency coming home to our true nature that is the greatest gift we offer to a possibility for this 3D reality to be one of joyful connection and peace. I don't know if that's helpful or not, but it's basically to be right where you are, see it comes to you. It may be something that you think of, or it may be a person who offers something or suggests something, and then be with that and see where you come out with it.
Thank you.
But the greatest gift we give is to be in our own true north on our own behalf. And from there, you see, you're funded. When you're true north on your own behalf, you're funded to make a difference in what looks like the out there. You have what it takes because you're present with the power of reality. Awake awareness is everything. And when you're no longer needy, in other words, you don't have to get something or avoid something to be okay, then you are the deliverer of this. And you don't have to judge in what it looks like or what way that might be.
Yeah, Marcy.
Well, this is actually a variation of the same question. we can feel, I mean, just coming here the other day, I can feel that there's a trauma field here. And I can also feel the love. What do we do in the midst, if it's triggering our own kind of fear, you know, living in Northern California and fires and all of that, how do you be with the energy that's here and kind of move above it or move through it when it's triggering our own fears?
Well, what I was pointing to in my last response was the sensitivity. I mean, you know, I often say I'm not empathic, I'm a cave woman. I don't, but I do feel the feels. When I was evacuated, when I was sitting in my tiny house and the winds were coming and the whole house was rocking, I was thinking, I'm in the middle of the Wizard of Oz here. You know, it was like tornadic winds there. But to be present with what is without fear is the contribution we can make. When it triggers your prior early experience fear, which may be a past life, maybe in this lifetime, it's like that's to do the work on, because what our greatest contribution is not to collapse into the lower frequency, but to be the possibility for the what I want to say, alchemical shift in frequency that comes from another possibility. It's not about collapsing into or going towards non-feeling or non-concern. It's a higher octave of that, which is I am the field in which everything arises, and it moves to its highest possibility. But see, this is a contribution we can make. We make an energetic contribution by not collapsing into the fear. If we're collapsing into the fear, even if we can feel it, which I agree, I mean, that is a hell realm. There's no doubt about that. But if we can know, and in that, what the word know means is to be one with, we can be with a oneness with what's a larger reality, what's a higher frequency, what's possible. And in every moment, if we're triggered, to do our work. Thank you, Marcia.
Thank you.
And please, if you have any questions or want to talk to Pali from the Zoom room, please raise your hand or unmute yourself and we will spotlight you. Oh, Kim has her hand raised. There we go. I'm gonna spotlight her.
Me?
Yeah, Kim, you had your hand raised?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, thank you.
Hi, Polly.
Right.
This is there's a continue. I mentioned it earlier to you, and it's in a way it's connected to what the previous two people asked. I am having a lot of trouble telling the truth now that the dropping into the truth of the projected reality is all that I'm interested in. And I don't have any trouble and I'm speaking about specifically telling the truth about what the truth is for me, about reality. I'm not talking about any other telling of the truth, but speaking about it, especially in these times, which maybe there are always times of crisis and earthquakes and famines and fires, but in these times it's very, very hard for me to maintain a verbal allegiance or to even know what that looks like when, say, we're talking about the fires on Maui, an allegiance to, I won't even say it now. It just feels like I'm going to get it wrong. I'm so bad about it. I found myself a couple of weeks ago with a very good friend who has done inhuman amount of meditation in rather harsh Asian monasteries. and really believes in the step by step you've got to go from one stage to another. And if you think there's a spontaneous awakening, you're in denial. And I can't even enter into that conversation. I don't know how to speak truthfully about what I know and feel. I understand that this is purely my fear of judgment and being written off. But I wonder if you have anything to say about that, whether it's about the I listened to the last satsang, and Robin, I felt so grateful for your questions, Robin, as I often have, where you said, well, we're here in this heaven realm and we're actually fine. How to be with that. And for me, it's how to be truthful. I'm not sure if I'm saying correct, accurately.
Well, what you're creating is that your self-judgment occludes any possibility of being judged out there, right?
Yeah.
You shut yourself down. So it's like just being present and looking to see. It doesn't work for my human design, and it never has occurred to me. Well, it did years and years ago, and that's a different story about when I thought I was a teacher of A Course in Miracles. Who knows? But it would never occur to me to offer something to somebody unless I was asked. That can be a part of a human design, a response of the ability to respond, or the not overreaching by offering something. Typically, when we think that we need to be expressed, that's an ego kind of assertion. The idea that your frequency and your inner work of being on your own behalf and showing up authentically with yourself, because you are the world. That is the most important thing. That's how we make a difference. We have been indoctrinated or conditioned. Yeah. We've been conditioned to believe that we may only make a difference when we dig the ditch, right? But the reality is that we make the difference by our shift in consciousness to our own wholeness. We are the world. And in that world, who you're being to yourself is the whole story, and it makes a difference. That's how we will create a new heaven and a new earth, is by who we're being to ourselves. Once that's done, the next step will appear. It may be that somebody asks you, what's the truth for you? And then it's easy for you to say because they asked. But the idea that we should be able to represent ourselves so that we have some kind of influence or impact is way overrated, because it's our frequency. In fact. Yeah.
I understand, but honestly, it was because I was asked. I wouldn't dream of entering into that conversation unless I was asked. But even to be honest, unless I'm in a position of teacher in a room, then I have no problem. But if I'm just in a social situation and I'm asked, my words turn to sand in my mouth. And then even if I say the exact same words that you've said to me, they feel like cardboard when I say them in some situations, unless I'm speaking to the choir, some of whom are here, and I really appreciate that.
Yeah, it starts to be, let's see how to say this. It's sounds very irreverent, but once you don't give a shit, you're free to speak.
Yay.
It's like let it fall wherever it does. It's like, it's just such of the freedom within our own self that comes from the self-judgment falling away, is the freedom to be in full expression in whatever way without concern for results. Yeah.
I hear you. So once again, it's that fear of being stoned.
That's right. Yeah, that was a bad incarnation. I know. I remember that one. Darn. Thank you, Kim. Thank you.
Yeah, Amara. So, I'm new to you, Polly,
Yes, we are.
and
So glad you're
I'm
here.
yeah, thank you. I'm really curious if you can help me to like open up the world of self-judgment.
Mhm.
Like, what is that? How does that move? What does that point to? How do I
Mhm.
track that in
Right.
myself?
Thank you for that question. I do have a protocol that a lot of people in here are really familiar with called the 6 Steps to Freedom. Pierre Paulo and I have talked about it at times. It's the place that get accesses for what you're looking for is whenever you're triggered. And there's the danger with people like us is that I was really seriously in jeopardy in this regard because I gave up all resistance to everything, you know, so I never got triggered. Dangerous territory. You want to get triggered if you can't be triggered. So it's looking for what tweaks you, what gets a reaction response, because that's going to be the direction in which you will move into recalling what you concluded about yourself with the early wounding. And that's the goal. Because once that's in place, you know, before I found the 6 Steps to Freedom process, I knew that forgiveness was at the heart of dropping self-judgment and judgment of others, which is all the same thing. And I used Ho'oponopono because I'd been in Hawaii for a long time, and it worked to a certain degree. But the 6 Steps to Freedom is very precise. It's rather surgical in a way, so that, and I'll be glad to make sure that you get a copy of it if you don't have one. I think I may have mentioned it on the Zoom.
You did, and I mean, I could use a refresher on it, but I have heard them and they are brilliant
Right.
to do. And I do that. I mean, there's always more to do because there's always things being triggered with that. But I have a feeling there's like a level of self-judgment that is like different inside of me,
Mm.
like that doesn't come from like the trigger, because I'm pretty willing to see the trigger at this point.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
I just, like, when you spoke, I could like feel this layer in me,
Mhm.
like, ooh, like I think there's ways I do that I don't know. I don't know what that is. I don't know how it shows up.
That feeling that you're pointing to is the trigger.
Mm.
That feeling, and it may be obscured. Like I say, I certainly was a genius at appearing to but not ever be ruffled, right?
Yeah.
So, but getting in touch with any discontent, discomfort, dis-ease.
That's a good one.
Yeah, just it's the subtlest thing. It's like, oh yeah, you know, you can't hide any longer.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good one for me. Thank you.
Yes. Mhm. Yes.
Yeah. Um, I'm also new to Pali, although I feel like I know you. And know many in the room. I see my recovering Catholic still because I don't like to trigger people and I don't like it when they trigger me. So I recognize the trigger quite well. And I don't like it. So that in itself is a resistance.
Right.
And it shouldn't be that way because life is peace, you know. So I have a little bit of a story. So
yeah.
I will just be love and I want people to be loving.
Yeah.
And yeah. So if you have something to offer there, because
Mhm.
there's also like, I need to be good.
Right.
When you said don't give a shit, it's like my heart was like, no, you have to care. My mother was the most devout, loving, kind person that I've ever met.
Mhm.
So
Is she still with you?
no, she passed.
Mhm.
Yeah, she passed, but she left some powerful teachings
Mhm.
that are still, you know, guiding me.
Mhm.
So how to hold that? Because I can embrace the angry one, and I can embrace I become the wounded child.
Right.
They become the let's say the rebellious teenager, the other. And then in that meeting place, I can still love, but I don't know if I'm if, you know, because if I'm in the middle of work, I don't want to fall apart as a puddle of tears. Does that resonate?
What was the last thing you said?
Oh, like if I'm working
Uh-huh.
and I need to be creative,
Mhm.
and I see my trigger, which becomes a wounded child, a tear may fall, and I can keep going and embrace that.
Mhm.
Am I missing a step
Mhm.
because I need to keep?
Yeah, the step you're missing, which I didn't have, that's why I was elated when I found that this 6 steps to freedom is derived from A Course in Miracles. I don't
Yeah.
find the correlation particularly in the way that I use it, but yeah, the part that you're missing that I was also missing in my spiritual bypass
Yeah.
was what did I conclude that meant about me? Because that's what gets installed when that wounded child had the experience of they're not there for me, or I'm being punished. You know, there are, as we know, there are terrible horror stories because basically wounded children are the parents that now have wounded children. I mean, that's been the condition. The sins of the father visited upon the sons is from the Old Testament. So what we miss there with just the forgiveness, allowing the tear to fall and being puddled or whatever there, what we miss is what we concluded that got installed that we believed about ourselves when that happened. Yeah, and so it's like if you get shut out of the room and you believe that you're not going to get dinner, you're not going to get supper, and then your heart is broken, right? And that can be triggered and different things that happen. But that little girl, when that happened to her, not only was her heart broken, she concluded that it meant that she didn't deserve, that she was not good enough, or some version of that. I'm a throwaway, I don't even matter. And that's what gets installed. And it's like an operating system. And now the entire reality is on that many distortion fields of that installation and everything that shows up there. So the reason the triggers are important is because with the 6 steps, they can take you to that conclusion. And it's that conclusion that we forgive ourselves for. I forgive myself for ever having believed I don't matter. I forgive myself for ever having believed I'm not good enough. That whole thing, and what forgiveness is in this model is awareness shining on something that is an error. And so it's dispelled. That is so much light. The light of awareness on anything is alchemical. It's like sunlight on mold. That when I realized that that's what forgiveness was, it was like, hallelujah. Does that help?
I know that territory well. I know what I concluded.
Yeah.
It's that I still don't like when it happens. Do you see?
Yeah.
I know what I concluded.
And you concluded what? Do you mind sharing?
I'm not wanted, say,
Uh-huh,
or
right.
I don't belong,
Right.
or
right.
something like that. I'm
That's
not
right.
loved. So in that awareness, I don't take it far because I see what it is. I'm waking up in the moment of the awareness. It's that I still don't like when it happens.
Right, because you haven't.
So there's another step.
Go, please.
There's another,
That's right.
yeah.
And it is the forgiveness.
I think it's a deeper forgiveness.
Well,
I've done plenty forgiveness.
Well, there are certainly what we would think of as levels to it.
Mhm.
And and because it's alchemical, there may be levels that you can't even verbally describe.
Yeah.
But when they occur, it's dissolved. It's literally eliminated. And so if you're still experiencing, and I don't want to feel that, or I don't want, then you haven't gotten to that level.
Yeah.
And you can clearly,
Yeah.
you got it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just a little prolonged, not long. It's not
Right.
long in that place, but thank you. That's helpful. Appreciate it.
Yeah, so most of you know my story, but I was so good at not resisting that I'd had like 20 years of being very closely seen as awake. I knew it wasn't true, but there was a lot of shit here. But so what happens then is then the frequency of being against yourself that's no longer experienced because you're like this oblige, you know, you're like everything's wonderful. If you need anything, let me help you. Yeah, all of that. So when that gets to a certain place, then what will happen is that the truth of who you are will participate in creating something that you cannot avoid. And I did that. And it all crashed in. It all crashed in around me. It was family, property, and money. I call it an episode of Dallas without the sex. So it all came down, right? And I'm right there. And all of a sudden I'm like, oh my God. And because I'd done the work with Byron Katie, and that was what I was using and working with people at the time. This was 13, 14 years ago. I heard Katie's voice. If you're suffering, you're believing something that's not true. Yeah. And I was believing that their well-being depended on me, that they were more important than I was. And at the human level, that may or may not be true. But as the reality of true nature, it's impossible. So that got corrected.
That's great.
Thank you.
So in that moment, do you just forgive yourself? Like in that split second, do you have to like just feel it?
Well, what
inside
happened here, I don't know how it is for others, but what happened here was when I saw that I was believing something, and that the setup, see, the inquiry is if you're suffering, you're believing something's not true. So the minute that you're suffering and you engage with that inquiry, there's something happening there that's creating the suffering. And that was what was revealed to me. And it was rather immediate, and it was like this bright light came on. And it was like, what happened was the idea of others, the idea of a me, it all just, it was just dispelled. But I mean, I was close to 70, so it's not like I was an early learner. Yeah.
We have time for one more question, if there's a short one or thought, either on the Zoom room or here.
Pali, I lived your teaching for quite a while. And when everything is good, life is good, everything is smooth, everything is just fine. And then once in a while, something happens, and then you approach a trigger point, and then somehow we go in that big fear, and whatever comes up, it's big fear, maybe a financial squeeze or whatever. And everything when that sometimes once in a while happens, then I feel, wow, okay, well, whatever you need teaching, everything falls apart, and then you're at the bottom and you don't know. And then so I can feel that the ego is triggered, and the attachment, you feel, wow, there's still attachment there. It's not nothing. You're not nothing. So sometimes for me, it's a sign that there's still a wish to go, even though there's nothing to learn, there's nothing to do, anything. It's just, but obviously I still have this ego and attachment is still there, and that's my trigger point.
That's your what?
My trigger point.
That's right. That's right. But see, everything you just described here was just like, you just described an object, right? I mean, the real shift in perception that's vital is to see the difference between what I have, which is that trigger point, that fear, that whatever, and who I am as the awareness, without which I wouldn't even know that. Yeah. See, it's a meta perception in a way. I've got that little bot that says, oh, she doesn't love me, or there's not enough money, or whatever. The fear comes up. That's the little Pac-Man going across the screen, but you are the whole game. You're the awake awareness in which is showing up. So without this awareness, you don't even have that. So you can reclaim your attention from what you're believing. We do it through forgiveness if we can see the connection to the woundedness, or we can do it because, you know, the reason it's still there. Fundamentally, the reason we have anything that we don't want is because we're resistant to it. And that resistance is what keeps it configured as a problem. Or, yeah. So, you know, seeing anything it's the alchemy of awareness, seeing something. It's clearly not who I am. It is what right now I've got in my experience, in my mind, in my story. Okay? But without awareness, I don't even get to play that victim game. You know? Is that helpful?
Yeah.
A little bit?
It's all here.
It's all here. That's right. Yeah. The good news is that we don't have to do anything out here to correct our issues. We have soul access. In fact, if we try to do it out here, they will be, they love that kind of attention. I suspect that egos love therapy.
Egos love therapy.
So it's 3:30 here. We're gonna pause. Thank you so much, Polly. If you'd like to make a donation to Polly, you can do that by Venmo or PayPal, or there's a basket on the table. And we're gonna go into a 45-minute silent meditation. Any other announcements? I don't think so. No. Okay, we're gonna go into 45-minute silent meditation. Make yourself comfortable if you're staying, if you're leaving. Thank you for coming.
Yeah, feel free to leave it. It's we put it at the end so that people have the option. It's certainly not anything that it's just that many of in our Sangha here in South Maui have really appreciated sitting longer together. So that's why we're doing this. But and anybody who is leaving now, thank you for coming and stay in touch.
Thank you, Polly. Love you.
Who's that?
Sergio.
Oh, Sergio. That
Yeah.
Mwah.
So make yourself comfortable and we'll go ahead and start.